Hi, everyone. I'm Heena Purohit. I'm the Director of AI Startups at Microsoft. And I sit at the intersection of the best frontier AI native startups, as well as the enterprises that are actually using this technology, taking it to production, and to derive meaningful value from them and to help them innovate faster. And I want to start today with a very simple question. If I gave all of your engineering organizations the ability to generate 10 times more code tomorrow, will that produce 10 times more value for your organization? Probably not. And this is where 10 times more code will not generate 10 times better outcomes for your organization. If anything, it may create a lot more problems because all of that code needs to be verified. There's security and compliance questions that need to be answered, dependencies that need to be understood, and so on. So we've spent the last few years understanding, can AI and generate code, and answering that question. The answer is now, yes, it can. So that is no longer the question that enterprises are asking. What enterprises are asking is, can we build a system around this AI generated code that they can actually trust? And that's the question that we'll be teasing in our panel today, where we're going to be teasing out the question and the problem statement around the agentic software engineering factory that enterprises actually need. We're not going to be talking about one magical autonomous agent. We're going to be talking about what the agents actually need, the context, what they need to govern, how do we give them permissions, how do we make sure that everything we're doing is ultimately helping us understand whether this AI generated code is actually producing better outcomes for our engineering teams, but also our organization overall. And I'm super excited for our panel today because we've brought to you 3 leaders whose organizations are not only leaders in their individual categories, but each of them is solving a really important problem of this stack that I just described. So, our panelists, thank you for joining us today. And I'd love to start with having you all introduce yourself. Tell us about you, your company, and how your company is helping solve an individual problem within this agentic software engineering stack that I described. Itamar, we'll start with you.
Great to be here. I love to talk about all of these topics. We're dealing with them day to day. So, Itamar Friedman, the CEO and co-founder of Qodo. Qodo stands for Quality of Development Optimization. That's really very relevant. We're basically the adversarial part for the coding agents. Qodo specialize in code review, code governance, basically understanding the organization and code base, including the metadata, creating that context and using that for code review at the gateway, at the gatekeeper point of the pull request, but also as you code. And on top of that, providing the holistic understanding, where is your software health, technical depth right now? Very excited to be here and talk to you all.
Thank you. Chase?
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here. Chase Norton, head of AI at Faros. We are focused on optimizing token engineering and looking specifically at how do we tell the story from the AI sessions that we all have, connecting them to engineering artifacts, and then further connecting them to strategic initiatives in the company. The idea is, as we've moved from token maxing, we now understand that adoption is happening. So we've got that covered, but really it's looking at how do we maximize outcomes? How do we actually say that these sessions, this AI work is connected to the outcomes that the company cares about, and building a framework around that. So very happy to be here and answer all the questions that we have ahead of us.
Thank you. Patrick?
Awesome. Thanks for having me. My name is Patrick and I lead product management at Moderne. Spent the last few years evolving how developers can collaborate with agents at Microsoft and GitHub. But now at Moderne, our goal is to help you build the agentic SDLC around agents. And more importantly, how do we achieve AI at scale? And how we're looking at that is how we give AI agents a deterministic system of tools so they can work accurately, efficiently, and productive at scale. And we're grounding it in a compiler accurate model of your code.
And thank you. I think this is where the interesting part that I want our attendees to hear is also all three of you were in this space before the Gen AI wave, so to speak. So from your vantage points, I'd love to start with the problem rather than the technology. So can you tell us what problems did you start seeing emerge as AI generated code started scaling across the organization? So Chase, let me start with you.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think it really began with like we were all playing in the browser in like 2022 with like ChatGPT, and then almost the next year, a year and a half, we started to adopt it into enterprise, right? And so there wasn't really a framework, a way to actually work with it. It was more just like use it. And I think that began kind of like the problems that we see today is that there wasn't this like, how do we use this well? And I think we're at the point now where that question is being asked of we have this very powerful technology. And so what is the best way to use it to get the outcomes that we care about? And I think that problem began with like, we didn't have the process, we didn't have the framework. And now we're starting to discover and build out that framework. And so I think that's what we've seen the most is just companies saying like, I don't even know how to use this well, right?
Yeah, the hows behind it. Patrick.
Exactly.
Yeah, on my side, it's interesting building the product and then now actually experiencing it. What I see is I think there's a bottleneck that has been moved across the SDLC where essentially AI didn't remove it, but it just relocated it from writing code to trusting the code. So essentially what I'm seeing is the writing part of the code has been accelerated, like at the speed of AI. And now we're feeling a human tax on it, which is the code review piece. And the reason is we're seeing code that's being created that is almost right. And like the cycle time hasn't dropped. So now it's spending a lot of time on the downstream pieces like reviewing, testing, and the validation.
Yeah.
And I think some of these outcomes, Heena, it can go to like tech debt, to developer satisfaction, even increasing the landscape for security, just because now there's this landscape of this. So I think it's affecting quite a few different pieces, starting with the human.
Yeah, human and the trust, which is so central to enterprises. Itamar.
Yeah, so I think definitely human judgment, right? That's how to exploit that and without burning out our senior developers. That's what I'm seeing like as a, the umbrella term for the second day problem after we solved quote unquote the coding part. I'll connect it to a question I see in the chat. Someone asked, "What is the AI DLC?" It's AI SDLC. So SDLC is software development lifecycle, and some people like us might enhance to say artificial intelligence SDLC or agentic SDLC. And the idea is that when we're looking on our software and want to create outcome, it's not just about writing code. It's about being able to stream a need from our customer or a vision or a mission that we want to make come to life, come true, and to put it in the hands of our customer. It's not just writing a code; it's everything. So in the old days, I'm calling old ABC before ChatGPT, like we a lot of the judgment was in the coding. Let's admit it, the product managers write the spec, they would try to do their best, but a lot of the judgment was while you're writing the code. And if you are delegating that, and you should, right, to a coding agent, then there's more judgment that is spilled somewhere else. Because with all the respect, there's actually some judgment being done for us, and some that actually nowadays that needs more of that. And a lot of that judgment is now on the shoulders of the senior developers, and even more because more code is coming in. And that's why like code review matters, but quality workflows matters. And basically to say like, how do you make that probabilistic coding to something more deterministic, right? Although it's a problem.
And I think I want to expand on that, and I will. Thanks for dropping the questions. I'll try to get to all of them at the end. So I want to expand on what you just said. So we have a few, actually quite a few, from what I'm seeing, like architects on our call. They're looking at the entire system, and if you think about it, like let's say I am the CIO of a company or even an engineering manager. This is where the reality is quite different. The reality is we have thousands of engineers, thousands of code bases across so many different repos. Some of them have coding assistants, like many enterprises today use GitHub Copilot. Let's say they might be using a Claude Code or Cursor for that matter. And they also have legacy code that's already been written. They have existing CI/CD pipelines, security requirements, compliance needs, and so on and so forth, right? So this is the reality of an enterprise today and these software engineering teams. So can you tell us, for a leader that today might be trying any of the coding assistant tools, or Chase, to your point, maybe they're just still at a chat GPT or a Copilot and generating code and using snippets at the UI layer, what are the components that these teams should be thinking about beyond coding assistance? And Itamar, I'll start with you, just building off of that point.
Yeah, sure. So let's allow ourselves to be a little bit of visionaries and look like what things might look like in 3 years. We can argue in the time. So a lot call it the dark factory. Basically, you have a software factory where the input is what you want your software to look like, and the other side you get the software. Basically, it's kind of like almost a Chinese room experiment. Like you almost don't care what you have inside, as well as what you're requesting is coming out. If we don't have that block, you can see it as like almost like a new team member that is capable to do everything, and you ask a request and get the output at the speed of AI. Now, with all the respect, like to some people that are showing that on different social media, we're not there, especially in the setup that you mentioned. I think we're very far, but I do think that we want to put that in front of our eyes and then start to build backwards. So I would think about it like have a school of thought. One is like, okay, let's think about my most like capable engineer. What is that person is doing in order to be able to do that end to end? And then you're thinking, okay, that person have tribal knowledge, experience in my organization. What worked well, what didn't work well. How do we maintain code in the company? How do we communicate new features? I'm not kidding. Like, how do we communicate new features or new configuration? I don't know if you guys like bump into that. Okay, like a new feature, but it has a configuration need to be so. And then you're saying, okay, I need to build like the automation of those elements, and that needs to be as deterministic as possible. So some of them will become infrastructure. I need to think, how do I build my context lake, context engine, whatever we want to call it, but it's that memory that includes not only knowledge per se, but also experience that we accumulated as a company, as an organization. And then you need to have like automation that is more specific, like documentation, all that. So break it down. That's one school of thought. Take it from the developer backward. Of course, there's more ways to think about it, but time to pass the microphone.
Yeah. Patrick, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think like, Heena, if you were, or to all these CIOs, when you're saying, okay, you have your models and you have your coding assistant, what I'm looking at is those are two pieces that have been presented to us. But when we look at the full architecture, essentially, there's a few other substrates that we need. Thinking even when we go back and developers needed editors to read the code, how do we actually have the agents read the code? And this is where essentially getting on this concept as code as your data, because code is like the most important data set that these enterprises own. But today, these agents read it as characters and letters when they just look at the code base. Like developers had editors, so they're able to read the code. So how do we build the tools, like you were asking, more than just coding agents, more than just models? What else do we need? At least at Moderne, how we look at it we're actually taking the frame of like a biologist. We look at the code base like a genome. Instead of reading the characters, how do we sequence it so that it allows the agent to query actually the code base? So we're adding a tool in between to get to the code base. And ultimately, if we do that so they get everything at the full fidelity of what the compiler sees, you help the agent better find things, better frame things, and better fix things. So thinking when you ask me coding agents and models, I think it's also tools so that they can actually read and query the code base.
Totally. And this is where both of you are talking about how context is king. So Chase, what are you seeing?
100% on the context is king. Having a company context lake is, I think, critical. And so if like we're trying to provide like the listeners for some key takeaways, I think context lake or company context lake, start building that so that your agents, as they are starting to explore the problem space, they actually have all of your company context. Maybe it's your CRMs, maybe it's related to your engineering artifacts, whatever is the direction that they need to go, they have that context. The other thing also is ensuring that you have the right guardrails set up. It is notorious that this work is never perfect when it opens up the PR, but as you provide those guardrails, it can start. I always think about it as like putting this mesh layer over them, and as they make a change here, it kind of causes rises over here that they then notice, right? So making sure that your guardrails are set up for your agents, making sure that you have the context, and then making sure that you have a verification space for them to go through those loops on, to verify whether or not it's in a browser, it's in a database, wherever is that verification space allows for them to continue the loop until it gets to a point that they can open up the PR or the engineering work. I think also it's this idea of like, we've talked about the SDLC. It's this idea of like, at least in my head, the SDLC is, we have a good framework for it, right? We have our engineering artifacts, we have like, different components of it. And almost like AI sessions or AI usage is now on this like external, right? It's this other thing. It lives sometimes in, Anthropic's database, or it lives in OpenAI, or it lives in, Copilot. And so how can we start to bring that in? And I think I saw someone ask about like ROI. And it's this idea of once you can bring AI usage into the traditional SDLC, you can actually start to model it. You can start to ask what if questions. You can start to probe it more. And I think like that becomes the first connection point, is think about how you want to connect those sessions, that usage into the traditional SDLC. There's various ways, but the agents do have a rich metadata when they emit their OTel events, or they go through proxies or whatnot. There's a lot of metadata there to connect it in. And so thinking about how to do that, I think, is critical.
Right. And I think that is so excellent, because you spoke about the context, but also added what's called the harness layer that we've been speaking, whether it's the guardrails or the element that provides verification. The true reality is that when we talk about LLMs, like all of this powerful capability is probabilistic, but enterprises need these determinisms, these controls that y'all are describing. So I'd love to also hear about like how should enterprises think about bringing some of those determinisms and controls. So like just to expand on what you said, Chase. And Patrick, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, for sure. I think I look at it where when a developer goes and writes something with a coding agent, it's looking at like a shape. Can we find the right piece to fit the right shape? So X and Y. So let's look at probabilistic work. I think it works when it's like, because it's built for open-ended reasoning. It's great for planning. I think the developer needs to be in the loop, and it's okay to retry. So that works for like one repo. But where it breaks is, imagine if you're doing that same thing with the coding agent across thousands of services or multiple repos. That's where non-determinism starts to compound at scale. And if we look at it, let's say, for example, you get 92% success rate and you get 8% failure. Because it's non-deterministic, it's also figure out where that 8% is. And when I talk to a ton of customers doing this non-probabilistic, but at scale, they also say, okay, there's a trust issue. So like what we're trying to get at for this is how do we build deterministic tooling so that the agent's job isn't being the tool, but it's reaching the tool. And this deterministic tool can't just be deterministic. It also needs to be something that we can trust and that we can essentially believe in. And at Moderne, that's what we do with recipes. Essentially, it's based off the compiler. It's fully tested, unit tested, and also looking at the different diffs so the agent can just reach for it to get that accurate, trustworthy, deterministic execution at scale.
That's great. So you've really embedded some of that determinism in your platform. Chase, what's it like on your side?
Yeah, I think, these will always be probabilistic, and there is. It's almost like we're trying to push towards determinism, but I think it starts, which we're having success. But I think it starts with just being able to measure, observe before you begin to optimize and then govern, right? And what we're seeing is the first step of just observe has its own challenges, right? How I keep mentioning bringing AI sessions into the SDLC, but it's this idea of like, do you know the outcomes that you're generating? Do you actually know what your agents are producing in terms of like what your company cares about? And what we've seen is that just that question has a large no to it. And people are now trying to understand not just like the token spend, not just like how much we spent this month, but really what do we care about in the company and are we actually moving towards that? Once you make that connection, then everything else starts to kind of come in. Then you can start to optimize. Then you can start to kind of go deeper into it. But at least trying to push towards more deterministic processes begins with measurement, right? And so I would just encourage everyone who is listening to start to like at least start to focus on that as like the first solve. And once you solve that, then the unlocks come from there.
Excellent point. Itamar.
Yeah, I'll start with saying the obvious that I think we're probabilistic as well, right? Like I think we wouldn't be able to make this conversation.
Very true.
But still, we are able to create some software. So far, this video conference is working well, although like it's Enigma, like video conferences, like so it works, right? Like although we are probabilistic, so I think like what like abstractions and breaking down into smaller component is bringing down the variance of the probabilistic stochastic behavior. So what I'm saying by that is that once as humans we put processes, we put guardrails, then we put checks and we put measurement, and we take that probabilistic process into something that into a framework that reduces our variance to some extent. Some will say that that's arguable, but I think actually the opportunity with agents is even bigger because we can able to auto scale, and we can able to dive deeper. Like Google, if we try to compete with Google or Bing or so on search, then we probably need to spend so much time. Maybe we do a better job, but for a very short amount of time, we won't. Like if you give 10 seconds to search the library. Same thing here. The way we need to think about how to turn the probabilistic into semi-quasi-deterministic is take the AI SDLC, and break it down to really small components. I have like a disclaimer there in a minute, to break it down to really small component and try to put workflows on there that are specific. For example, you take the code review, it's not just one task, there's hundreds of subtasks, like verifying against the intent, verifying against this architecture, verifying against issues we had in production, verifying that the documentation and so on. So like it takes time for us to harness AI and get to that AI factory that we talked about, but if we break it down, we can get deterministic. One last thing, we are talking about SDLC and AI SDLC, and I think there's the elephant in the room, like should it look the same at all? Like maybe it's a whole new SDLC. What are we doing? Like we're doing like optimization that is minimal, local minimum, and not like a global minimum. So I just want to throw that while we are saying, look at your current problem in the SDLC and see how you can automate that, I think it is the way to go. But at the same time, once in a while, open your mind and think like, maybe I can think about it completely differently, because there is opportunity here. Just want to encourage that.
And I think this is where, Itamar, one question that I see is, what's the quality of what they're producing? Do you have anything to say to that far?
My mindset is similar. Like, the word quality is huge, and what is quality is, I think we're trying to answer that since the Greek time, and like, I think like the same answer, like, if we break it down to, okay, quality is testability, maintainability, compliance, etc. Okay, how do we measure compliance? How do we measure maintainability? How we measure testability? How we measure scalability? Like, there is eventually, like, in my opinion, 9 groups, and each one of them there is policies, and some of the policies are global, and sorry for the shameless plug, like Qodo can come with certain policies, and some of them are specific for each organization. And one of the opportunities of AI is to harness, learn, accumulate those scars and experiment from the past. And again, shameless plug, like, that's where like Qodo is focusing on. And then you get a qualitative answer. Okay, like, how is your code drifting over time, considering the global parameters, the global properties that most people would agree on, and those that are more specific to your organization, and you get a score and check over time. It works really well. There's research about if each one of us will try to say how much like a bus weights, we'll throw numbers, the average will be much closer to the reality. You know what I'm talking about? So breaking things down and then bringing the qualitative number at the end works quite well in many aspects in our life.
Absolutely. And I think if the underlying theme that all three of you are saying is really around having the right measurement, observability, in a way that's like got a continuous learning loop around it, and then making sure you have a good sense of like where, because the probabilistic reasoning, like you should know where to use that versus where to have determinism and define that for your teams. Chase, I want to go back to a term I heard you say, which is very popular in the engineering circles today, which is tokenmaxxing. And something I've heard you say recently is how you're actually helping companies go from token maxing to outcome maxing. And the interesting part there is I'm seeing engineering organizations measure AI impact right now through a lot of different metrics. Most of them are talking about, like, they're talking about utilization. How many licenses are they buying? How much they're utilizing? Or some of them report outcomes based on what percentage of their overall code is AI generated. I think this is where an agent can consume billions of tokens and produce nothing useful. So what, for all our teams on the call, what should they actually measure?
Sure. So, I mean, I think it's going to be unique to each company in some regard, right? What you care about is going to be different from even each team to team. But at the end of the day, what does a company care about? Is it producing product that people care about and use, right? Is it actually, are you producing value into the world? And at the very least, the easiest way to begin to think about it is you have some kind of strategic initiative platform, some kind of project management platform. People can call this Jira, they can call it Linear, they can call it whichever platform you use that stores what your company cares about, right? You have epics, you have tasks, you can group those epics into, this is what we care about here, this is what we care about here. But there is a definition of what the company cares about in these project management tools. And the nice thing is that we've learned how to connect engineering work to these company strategic initiatives and definition of what they care about. We've done that, right? We've been able to go into GitHub, attach a ticket, and now that work is connected. And so if you want to begin to tell the story of outcomes, you want to begin to tell at least one slice of the story. You have your AI work, you connect it into the engineering artifacts, and that story then connects into what the company cares about. You can separate this into different silos of, like, again, these epics live here and these live here. But the moment you do that, then you can start to model, you can start to look at and say, like, this initiative is worth this to the company, right? And you can define, like, these different epics are worth this to us. This is what we expect the outcome to be. This is what we expect the return to be on these initiatives. And all of a sudden, now that you've done that, it goes all the way back down to just that engineer and their session and what they're spending and how many tokens they are. But instead of looking at it so much of like, are they spending a lot of tokens? It's, were these tokens used for something the company cares about? And again, that story is rich enough and connected enough that here at Faros, we tell that story, but also you can kind of think about it in your head. Like, this is a way to look at outcomes that are driving what the company cares about, how they produce value into the world. And so that framework is something that I want to encourage the listeners to kind of think about.
Yeah, I love that framework. And then Anna's comment is so true, where this framework is like, as a former product manager and leader, I would talk about, it's a very important part of how we prioritize across products as well. Patrick.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with what Chase was talking about. I almost look like tokens, licensing, AI generated code feels like, back to your factory metaphor, is like what the electricity or what the factory consumes. It's not what it ships, right? So if that's what it consumes to operate, when we go back, what we should be looking at is what's landing, not what's generating. And that goes to the output piece, right? So I think from an engineering standpoint, it's, with all those changes, what are the changes that actually merge, stay in production, and stay merged versus all the small little changes that were happening? And then I think the second piece too is similar to, now that we have all these resources, how did we measure software before, right? With the DevOps piece, with other frameworks like Space or Dora, how has it impacted that human side as well? So I think we're just in a world where now we have factories, and instead of looking at what the factory is consuming, it's still looking at that end outcome.
Absolutely. Itamar, what are you saying?
Of course, I have an equation for that. On the nominator, let's put everything that is considered like pushing up upwards. We're happy. On the denominator is everything that pushing us down. We're not happy. So if we're going to 0 overall, we're not happy. Going to infinity, we're very happy. So token maxing is like as if we put 1 in the denominator and on the nominator tokens. Like, that doesn't make sense. I think if we're talking about like output maxing or outcome maxing, like, we need to define what is outcome. So let's think about, for example, amount of PRs that are created. I know it's a proxy, okay, and maybe quality of the code. Roughly speaking, I think like I love the Phoenix project book saying that you have features that you're developing, infrastructure you're developing, that's the positive. So you put that on the nominator, how many PRs, like how many features you developed, like, and how many infrastructure that allows you to move fast. And then there's, again, back to the Phoenix project, there's the bad thing, which is bugs and firefighting. You put that in the denominator, how many incidents you have, and how many bugs you have. You add to the denominator the AI cost and the human cost, and you have that. Now, repeating how many features created, how many infrastructure capabilities that enabled you to move fast, you can try to quantify human cost, AI cost, incidents, and firefighting. It's a magic number. You try to look at it. Even if you have your own definition, you look on the trend over time, and you will try to start to calculating your ROI, in my opinion, relatively straightforward once you have these 6 being measured and tracked.
I think this analogy of happy, have all the things that drive happy versus all the things in the denominator that don't drive happy, that's such a good analogy for many things in just even life. And I think this is where we've all spoken about the word factory a few different times now. So I want to bring that to the forefront, especially because on one hand, when you look at where the world is going, yes, we hear the term dark factories. And this is where we see papers, and we've been seeing people portray these visions of this world where we've got agents writing the code, reviewing the code, testing the code, like fixing those tests, deploying it, maintaining it, or like observing it in production. And then also, like, when something breaks, there's another agent that comes in and fixes it. And that missing piece in this picture is like the human part being largely absent. And while this is the vision, it's far, far, far away from the ground reality that all of you know. Like, for instance, when you're at a bank, this is where that operating model is crazy, and it's far from reality, and also maybe mildly terrifying to hear. So what would you suggest that our teams today should think about when it comes to what parts should they be comfortable having autonomous agents, or taking over and making autonomous versus which parts should they have greater control on? And Patrick, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, for sure. I think forever software will be a team sport, like humans and agents. But I think the question about autonomy is more, how do we embed the human logic into the SDLC? And then secondly, I think now, a few years down into this AI like wave, it's all about positioning. Where does the agent sit in this whole grand scheme of things? And when we think about where the agent sits, it starts to affect that autonomy word. So where I would feel comfortable is where the agent sits, and instead of them creating novel new code, but leveraging tested tools that we've already tested to make sure you get that quality, to make sure that the code review is something that we've already taken out of the loop. So once they go and pull on that piece, it's something that we can trust and look at the diff. And then again, it's giving more of the authority to the agent pulling on these different tools. So I think positioning is a really interesting place where the agent isn't always the one that needs to go do everything. Maybe it could be the one pulling on the different like buttons. And then I think like the ideal formula, at least how we're thinking about it, is the agent can plan once it gets to query, then look at all the tools that it can pull into, and then the change can land as a PR. And this is where, again, that human logic needs to be always there, but how do we start looking at it at like a higher level? So I think it's the positioning piece.
The positioning is so key. And then that statement that you started with, software will forever be a team sport. Couldn't agree more with that. Chase.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even today, so much of using AI well is a hands-on steering, hard steering. It's definitely not at the point of set it and forget it, even if like that is some kind of direction that we may be going to. But I think, it's interesting. We are at like what, year 5 of this, year 4 of this. And I say that because it's like what Patrick and I were talking earlier, and really we are the stewards. We are the kind of direction setters. Where we are in 15 years is up to all of us, right? We are all kind of learning in the moment, developing in the moment, discovering in the moment. And we'll look back in 20 years and think about like these first years as like we were kind of stumbling around in the dark trying to figure it out. But I say it in that kind of framework so that like I say it's okay to not know the answer, right? It's okay to not feel comfortable with autonomy, with this idea of like, how do we make agents autonomous? But the most important thing is to begin to feel where you're comfortable. So begin stepping into trying autonomy, trying to figure out where in your org, where in your company, where is your limit for comfort and understanding. And so one thing that we do, for instance, is we have a group of agents called like a review panel for every single PR that gets open. We have this panel that we've asked our senior engineers to encode their tribal knowledge into. So each member of the panel is an agent that has the tribal knowledge of the senior engineers, and every single PR gets reviewed. these then have a risk level associated with it. So is this a low severity PR? Is it a medium and whatnot? And we found that for the lower risk ones, we can start to automate the review cycle. And then that's where our comfort level is, right? And so, but like yours might be at medium, it might be at high, it might not be at all. But the point is like, start figuring out where you are comfortable, where your org is, where your engineers are. And also understanding that like where we are today is not at a point that we want every person on the team to be 100% AI mature. It's almost like you need that give and pull of the skeptics and the major AI pushers in order to like, keep things sane and keep the company sane. And even though one is pulling this way, one is pulling this way, you'll in the end move a little bit faster than you did pre-2022. But respecting that fact that like everyone's different, it's good to have the anti or the resistant, I should say, and also the kind of major AI forward people as well. So, but figure out where your comfort level is in your org, and then start experimenting from there.
And I think that experimentation piece is so important because to your point, yes, healthy debate is great, but like you have to experiment. And it's also okay to not want autonomy right now at all, but like as long as you're still taking steps forward. So absolutely. Itamar.
I think great points. I'll add two. One maybe a bit more straightforward, and then one a little bit more philosophy. The first one is, yes, greenfield, brownfield, and all that it matters a lot. But a different angle to look at it is which part of your software or code base or product you can relatively very high confident build verification loops. Like if, for example, you're able to bring going a little bit technical here, if you are going, can you bring an environment that is very similar to your production environment, and you have 100% coverage of different types of verification elements, not just tests, it's like compliance and functionality of different kinds, then I think actually this is a really good place, because eventually, in other words, you will have a report if to trust it yes or not. So I would think, and then of course there's biases. Like if you start greenfield, there's a better chance for that because you can start building it from the scratch. But in some companies, actually, they do have areas that you can compartmentalize and you have really good verification because from the get-go they build that for humans because we're probabilistic as well. That leads me to the second point. We'd like it or not, I think many would admit that. I even heard that from multiple Fortune, not only Fortune 500, even Fortune 100 that are financial institutions and our clients or so, that they think that code review by the P80, the 80% of the code review, not all of their developers, is close to crap. Sorry for my French. Like anyway, they're thinking that the code review is not well by humans. You don't have to agree or not, but to generalize that, if you think that there's places where humans are not good anyway, that's actually maybe an opportunity to improve. Like we are good in driving, but I don't think we're perfect. We have incidents, right? In driving, maybe actually if you can get to the level of a driver, you're good enough. We're good in searching in libraries, but maybe not as good if we don't have enough time. So that's Google. So look on the areas that you're thinking anyway, like I don't think we're doing a good enough job. What evidence can I bring to say that bringing an autonomous agent would reach that level to some, like with like maybe a different flavor of it or so. So these are the two things that I would consider.
And that's extremely helpful. I see the team is back. We've got 60 seconds here. So I want to just maybe do a rapid fire, folks. Thank you for joining. Excellent insights. Where can people learn more about you? So Patrick?
Yep. Where they can learn more, especially like thinking about code as a genome and code as data for agents, they can check out moderne.io that I'm sure, I think, Heena, you're going to share on the chat.
Anything, Chase?
Yeah, you can check us out at Faros.ai, token engineering and outcome maxing. Feel free to reach out, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm sure there's going to be a link there as well. But however you'd like to continue the conversation after, I'd love to keep it going.
Thank you. Itamar.
Yeah, Qodo AI, QODO, and personally, I mostly go around in LinkedIn and X, so Itamar Friedman or ITAMAR, MAR, another MAR is my handle there.
Awesome. Well, I know we're at time. Folks, thank you all for joining today. I took so many takeaways. I hope you took some notes along the way. And all the panelists, thank you for sharing just insights and also just tactics that our folks can take and bring into their teams. So I saw lots of claps, lots of raising hands along the way. So I echo that once more. And thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. Thank you.